Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Yulia. If you do resonate with this information, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it and it will help the channel grow. Also, if you're interested in my private consultation or in my book, the info is down below. And I'm giving away 2 free t-shirts a month. So if you're interested in that, the info is down below. So how long do you want to live? You would say, well, I'd like to live as long as humanly possible. But some of you would say, you know what? I don't care. I can live till 50 or whatever, but as long as I have quality life. And by saying quality life, you would be like, okay, I have to be financially stable enough where I can indulge. And that would be the ultimate goal of 99.9% of people. I want to be able to go to these fancy restaurants, have the best wines, have the best cigars, have the best pastries, like all of that stuff, overindulging, go to the best shows, see Cirque du Soleil, see something else, travel. And by traveling, it's not necessarily doing some activities, it's mostly foods. So we are a society, or like planetary actually, we evolve around food. And is it the healthiest way to go about it? I mean, I don't know, but I will tell you one thing. I have a friend who is a chef, and he told me a very interesting thing. He told me that they get the best cut of their steak. And the best cut of their steak sits and at certain temperature and rots, literally rots. So the bacteria will multiply in that piece of steak for 3 weeks before they serve it to their clients. And that's the most expensive cut of steak. And I'll go even farther than that, one step behind. So when the animal is alive, their intestinal flora is intact. Intestines are not penetrable, so bacteria doesn't go outside of intestines. As soon as the animal dies, that bacteria can penetrate the walls of intestines and spread throughout the meat. And that bacteria, exactly that bacteria we're talking about, that makes the meat softer. So in order for this bacteria to literally rot the meat and multiply in it and turn literally meat into a pile of shit, that's my perspective. But that's the fanciest meat you can get in the fanciest restaurant. The best, the most tender cut. The cut that you will taste and you will remember for the rest of your life. Is it worth it? For some people it is. But from my perspective, when I say I want to have quality of life, it means I want to be 70 or 90 and be exactly like I am right now. Maybe better. I don't want to have arthritis. I don't want to have some knee ache or bone ache. As a matter of fact, I want to improve my health by then, not break down. Is it possible? Well, it's worth trying. I mean, there are people who achieve really amazing results. But what scares me personally is, okay, you indulge right now for a decade, let's say, and you break down yourself, okay, 2 decades. And then you break down yourself to the point where you're dragging your feet and you have to wear your diapers. But what if you're stuck like that for the next 10 or 20 years? What if you have to wear diapers like that till you die? Well, it's not just only diapers, you know, I mean, obviously your personal life is out the window. I mean, you're wearing diapers now. You don't think about anything else. Your partner or anybody else. You are suffering, something hurts, something is falling apart, you need a surgery, you need to cut something out. I don't know, I don't see this as a quality of life. I mean, probably like that 10 years before you die would be so agonizing that it seemed like 100 years to you, and those 20 years you'll be looking back and you're like, it wasn't worth it. But damn, I have such a good memory of that steak, you know, that I had at that restaurant. It was so tender. Well, anyways, so there was a very awesome experiment done, and it was in 1932, and it was a 10-year study, multi-generational study of cats, and it's called Pottinger's study. So he was studying, Francis Pottinger was studying cats and how cooked food and raw food affects the development or deterioration of the cats. He came across that study randomly, I'd say, because what he noticed, he was working on the other study with cats, and he was studying adrenals, and he was feeding cooked food to those cats, and they were dying off too fast. So, and then he had expansion of cats, but there was not enough supply of cooked meat, of cooked food that was delivered to those animals. So they went to the nearest plant and started getting scraps of raw meat and feeding it to the remaining to the rest of the cats. And what he found out, they were thriving. So, and that's how he was like, well, I wonder if it's true that the diet affects maybe processed or heated, treated with heat foods. Maybe it was not valid anymore, or maybe everything was cooked out of it. So he didn't really question, or I'd say research enough, was behind it, but he observed the results of what he was doing, though. In a sense, behind it, like, is it necessarily cooked out nutrients or vitamins, or maybe it's really warped proteins that under the heat that turn into something that turned poisonous. Like, we don't know that specifics, but what we know is how that affected the cats. So he took a lot of cats, and when he announced that experiment, there was 900 cats involved in that experiment, and there were a lot of cats that were dropped off for him for experiments, like a lot of volunteers, you know, dropped off cats for him, and perceivably healthy cats. So they were evaluated and examined. They were separated into groups, and he was doing cooked and raw and processed milk, and also he was doing cooked and raw meat. So there was few groups, but the results were amazing because they were pretty much identical. Whether it was milk or meat, it was exactly pretty much the same. So when he was feeding them raw milk or raw meat, the animals were thriving. They were really good on their energy, on their sexual drive. They had strong bones. The density of their bones throughout entire, like, he did multi-generational study, so which was 3 generations, and throughout all of those generations, the density of bones, the content of it was 12 to 17%, I believe. 12 to 70% density, like, of calcium throughout the entire body of bones. So what he noticed is that when he was feeding cooked foods, which is cooked meat or processed milk, and condensed milk, that's another thing. So it's processed because it's not just processed, but they also added sugar into it, right? Condensed milk. So they were breaking down, deteriorating really fast. So some cats developed arthritis, like even the first generation. Some cats had, all of the cats actually started to have impaired balance. So their reactions were not as accurate, they didn't have agility. They had lack of energy. They had dental deterioration. So their teeth were breaking down, deteriorating, and also they had gum issues and a lot of abscesses in their mouth. So there were a lot of deterioration. And very interesting that the calcium in the bones, like osteoporosis we're talking about when in relations to humans, but it was done in experiments. I'll be specific, it was done on cats, but I'm saying as humans we have a lot of osteoporosis and thinning of bones as we age, right? So in this study he noticed that on the second generation the cats were at 10% of calcium throughout their bone by weight, you know, so it's like it's a drop from 12 to 17% of healthy cat to 10%, and then on the third generation it dropped to 3%. So the bones became so brittle, like paper thin and like rubberish or something, that they were so fragile they would self-inflict injuries. Also, cats were not, like, at the third generation of cooked food, cats could not reproduce anymore. So they would either have stillborn, and you're lucky if they would have actually later, because they lost actually sexual drive and interest as well. So after the third generation, it was pretty much done. Stillborn or just done. So that's how fast the breaking down of the generations of cats he observed. And then also he was taking completely, like, in devastated shape and condition, the third generation uncooked foods cats who were, you know, were all screwed up in their health, who had really brittle bones, who didn't have any agility, who didn't have any coordination anymore. They were, they had all sorts of gingivitis and dental issues, health issues. Oh, very interesting. The skeletal structure, the bone structure also changed. So with each generation, the cooked foods, like the cats that were eating cooked foods, their skulls changed. So it's because they were not, like, the nasal structure of the cat would not be even completely filled in on the second generation. And on the third, it would be completely different in structure. It wouldn't even be any more round, full head. It would be like flattened out because of partial of skull would be literally missing. It wouldn't even fill in the nasal, like, part of it. And even the look of the cat would be different. The weight would be different. With each generation on cooked food, they would get smaller. So there were a lot of abnormalities. So he would take cooked food, completely decrepit cats, third generation, and after third generation, they could not even reproduce. Like, that's it. That was done deal. He would take those cats and he would try to reverse the effects, which would be extremely difficult, but doable. So it would take him 4 generations of raw foods, feeding raw milk and raw meat. He also was giving them cod liver oil, but predominantly we are talking about cooked versus raw. And when he was feeding them raw foods like milk and meat, they would reverse back slowly, and by the 4th generation, they reasonably will be back to normal. So raw food cats never had any whatsoever deterioration or breakdown, and their skin, that their fur was shiny, and they were very agile, and they had a lot of energy, and they would interact like normal animals when they put next to each other, female and male, that express interest and what's so not. So opposed to cats who were on cooked foods, they absolutely didn't care about anything anymore, the 3rd generation. And it's actually, I watched the video. It's kind of sad to watch that some of them were so, their bones were so in many places fractured. It's just like in that movie where one is unbreakable and another is like breaks down like a glass, So what I think is based on there was another actually interesting study done. Dr. Weston Price, he did observations of indigenous people and that tribes, and he observed that if they were staying on their own diet, their native diet, which is not processed foods, they would just, eat as is, they would be very healthy, and their skulls would be perfect. They wouldn't need no retainers or anything. Their teeth would be straight. Everything would be perfect. But as soon as they start stepping away from it, closer to civilization in a sense that of processed foods and stuff like that, suddenly they would start developing all these issues that we in civilized places have, like the teeth are crooked, the underdevelopment of bones and skulls. All of that those issues and changes, like literally visual changes, are really substantial. So he proved supported that point of Pottinger's experience of cats, is that if you eat processed and cooked foods, then, you probably are working towards not quality of life at the end of your life. And like I said, the end of your life, it'd be awesome if you just like have a problem. Well, not awesome, but it'd be acceptable if you have health issue and then the next day you die. You're like, oh, I have arthritis. Oh, it hurts so bad. Okay, tomorrow I die, so it's okay. But it usually happens like that. Oh, I'm breaking down and I'm breaking down more and more and more. And now I'm in pain and I cannot walk straight and I cannot stand straight and I cannot go outside and I need assistance to bring me food over, some more food over. Fancy food though, from fancy restaurants. And then you like go through this motion for another 10 or 20, 30 years. Because nowadays technology and medicine and pills and all this equipment, they will help you keep going and suffering. So that's the thing. If you really want to have quality of life, maybe you should do research and look into what type of foods and what exactly affects your body in which way, in order to really have the quality of life. So when you're 90, you still will be just like when you were in your 20s. Is it possible? Well, the only way is just to try it and see for yourself.